Oh, I guess we are stuck here. Although, I hope our race of Indians will prosper and create the richest and the most advanced civilization in the world. Oh, we are doing this now? Got to change to my appropriate clothes. We all know this big guy. Some love him, some despise him. But we can't deny that he's one of the strongest nations in the world. It is an economical and military powerhouse, leads the strongest alliance in the world. The United States is located between the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean, with Canada bordering from the north and Mexico bordering from the south. With the capital being Washington, D.C., USA has 50 states, and I'm not going to list them all. That would take too much time. If you really want them to be named, check out Waco's song. He lists them in a catchy way. Okay, so we learned where the US is located and what its capital is. But we still don't know how the hell did it become so strong. So now we segue into the video's main topic. History. When the early humans started migrating, they settled to many continents, including North America. Most belief theories suggest that the tribes crossed the ice bridge between Alaska and Siberia during the Ice Age, but these people got stuck on the continent when the ice melted. These early inhabitants were called the Paleo-Indians. During the Ice Age, they hunted mammoths, but when mammoths went extinct, they turned on bisons. They also found beans, squashes, and corn around 8000 BCE, and by 3000 BCE, corn was grown in the valleys of Arizona and New Mexico. One of the oldest cultures was the Colvis culture, the name deriving from the spears they used, which had the Colvis points. Then there was Folsom culture, which used Folsom points. In the Pacific Northwest, Nadine people settled there and they loved to fish by 5000 BCE. Meanwhile, Oshara tradition people were a part of archaic Southwest culture. So yeah, this is what became of tribes who moved here and got stuck. A lot of culture sprung up and they were pretty happy with it. Little did they know that the fate of the continent was going to be sealed by the people who would come from the east. The first ever European to find America was Leif Erikson. He settled in modern-day Canada. Even though there were recordings of this, Leif didn't make America look hip and cool, and thus it still stayed irrelevant for a few hundred years. But in 1492, a man that did make America look hip and cool was Christopher Columbus. After sailing with Niña Pinta and Santa Maria, he hit the Caribbean islands and met with the local people, calling them Indians, because he thought he was in Asia. Long story short, he spread the news about the new land back in Europe. Ferdinand and Isabella were impressed and wanted more gold from Chris. Chris went back and committed a questionable act against the Indian people and died in 1506. Columbus was an odd fellow. Even though he has blood on his hands, he did in fact change the course of history. After his death, Spain loved the idea of expanding, and thus they captured a lot of American territory. Now the thing was, 16th century was the time where strong European countries liked to compete with each other on who would be the biggest and the most powerful. So, when they heard that there was this huge land up for grabs and that Spain was already eating it up, naturally, they wanted some too. Countries like France, Sweden, Netherlands, Portugal, and Britain established their colonies in America, but we will mostly be focusing on Britain. The first British colony was created in Virginia, named Jamestown. They mostly used it for trades and stuff, but soon after, the colony grew and grew, and later, the 13 colonies were born. Each 13 colonies were governed by their own governor appointed from London. The colonies were becoming richer and richer, but the money was also coming from the exploitation of the black slaves. The topic about slavery will be brought up again, but first, we got to talk about how the United States of America was born. During the 7 Years' War, Britain and France beat each other up, but in the end, Britain ended up victorious and took all of French lands in America, albeit with a huge price. Britain was in a massive debt and needed money desperately. What could be the best option that will not bite me in the ass later? Oh, I got it! I'ma tax the hell out of 13 colonies. Surely they won't mind. UK soon learned that yeah, the colonies did mind, and the Stamp Act of 1765 backfired horribly. The people refused to pay taxes and Britain was still poor. One time, the British brought some tea so that the people would pay for it, but something opposite happened. What's this? Oh, it's the tea you're supposed to buy and give me money with. Oh, cool. Let me just... Have you ever wondered what a bullet in your skull feels like? Then, the first Continental Congress was created to combat the intolerable acts movement created by Britain. For this, Americans used the phrase, "no taxation without representation." But, when Britain sent its army to America, Second Continental Congress was established to push the British out. Your Majesty, the Americans are revolting against us. What do we do? Well, fight back. Stabilize them. Show them who is boss. Your Majesty, you are a genius. I know. They don't call me a sex bomb for nothing. Not even your wife calls you that. I know. And thus began the American Independence War, or American Revolutionary War, call it whatever you want. Meanwhile, in 1776, July 2nd, the Second Congress drafted the Declaration of Independence, and on 4th of July, the Founding Fathers finally signed it, making the 13 colonies officially independent. At first in the war, Britain had the upper hand, but then an awesome man named George Washington, who led the Continental Army, defeated the British, with the help from France and other European powers, cause, you know, empirical rivalry, and thus George III pulled out of the 13 colonies. Okay, now I see why I'm not that sexy. With the signing of Treaty of Paris, George III finally recognized the independence of America. The Founding Fathers then wrote the Constitution and stated that all men were created equal, if we don't count the slaves. With this Constitution, it was said that the nation was going to be led by a president. But the question was, who was going to be the president? Well, of course, the best option was MVP of the American Revolutionary War, George Washington. His government was quite strong and helpful. It created the National Bank of the United States, assumed the debt of the states, and improved the infrastructure. In the meanwhile, Hamilton created the Federalist Party, but some were not happy with it. Thus, the government adopted the U.S. Bill of Rights in 1791. It consisted of 10 amendments, basically giving Americans their freedom and liberty. Surely they won't abuse it in the future. But then, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison created the Republican Party, which opposed the Federalists. They accused them that they were trying to make America into a monarchy and turn the rich into class. The conflict was never fully resolved. In 1803, Napoleon controlled Louisiana and USA really wanted it. First, the president at the time, Thomas Jefferson, offered France $10 million for a small bit of land, but France made even better offering $15 million for the entire Louisiana, and thus Jefferson bought it. Then, during the Napoleonic Wars, the British were committing anti-American acts, like supporting the hostile Indians against Americans and wanted to stop the US expansion to the west. Because of that, the Congress declared war on Britain, what became known as the War of 1812. The war, in my opinion, was just stupid. Nothing much was gained, just a needed loss of life. British burned down the Washington, while the Americans beat them on some battles with the help of Andrew Jackson. In the end, America did claim victory over the so-called Second Independence War, and peace was back in the nation. For some time anyway. Later through the early 19th century, America kept expanding west. With their manifest destiny, they thought it was God's plan that America was supposed to expand west. Although, I don't think God would have liked the acts committed against the Native Americans. While America kept expanding, the country inside was becoming more and more unstable. The nation was split into northern free states and southern slave states, the latter of which where slavery was basically the foundation of its economy. When new states kept forming, some chose slavery, some didn't. Overall, things weren't all that great. In 1845, Texas became independent from Mexico and wanted to join the US. But because the significant amount of settlers there were Mexican, Mexico didn't like that idea. And because of that, USA went to war with Mexico, destroying it and taking even more western lands. But then, in 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected president. This was really terrible for South because Abraham Lincoln strongly opposed slavery. Yet, he did not plan to take away their slaves. Listen here, I don't want to take away your slaves. You can chill out. There is no need for war. Well, honest Abe, you can take all your honesty and shove it. You know what? You're going to take so much whipping that the slaves you own will feel bad for you. On the 12th of April 1861, the American Civil War started. At the start, the Confederates with their best general Robert E. Lee kept repelling and pushing the Union back, while Abe had to deal with McClellan, who didn't want to attack the enemy. The war seemed so one-sided that the British thought that the Southern victory was inevitable. But in the end, in 1865 April, the Confederates surrendered and America was united again. The war was terrible. 750,000 Americans died. About 30% of Southern and 10% of Northern males aged between 17 and 40 were in that estimate. But, even though there were massive losses, the gain was huge. More than 3 million slaves became free, and by 13th Amendment, slavery was abolished, and with 14th Amendment, blacks finally earned their rights. While Lincoln was happy to finally see the end of the war, he would not get to enjoy it, because in April 15, 1865, a man by the name of John Wilkes Booth shot him in the back of his head, killing him on the spot. This shocked the nation, because assassination of a president was never seen before. 2 years later, in March of 1867, America bought Alaska for $7.2 million, and later along the years, the nation was slowly becoming more and more powerful. It rapidly industrialized. Technology was improving a lot. Mark Twain himself called this period the Gilded Age. Many immigrants kept coming to America to seek a better life. US also wanted to get on that whole colonialism business and sailed west, taking a bunch of islands like Hawaii, Guam, and Puerto Rico. It also arrived at Philippines, where the Spanish were not too keen on the idea of US expanding, but with American guns, they had no choice but to leave. And just like that, USA became a global superpower by the end of 1900, or how you Gen Z label it, an influencer. USA kept being chill for the start of 20th century. It even opened Panama Canal in 1914. And Europe suddenly decided that it wanted a large-scale war which would lead to millions of lives lost. At first, USA had no interest in joining the war, and Woodrow Wilson tried to negotiate peace, but Germany decided to act naughty, like wrecking Lusitania, on which were American citizens. This wasn't enough for America to go to war, but Germany sending Zimmerman telegram to Mexico saying that it should attack America was. And with that, America joined the war to beat the crap out of Germany, and later the Treaty of Versailles was written, which seriously crippled German economy and humiliated the German nation. But who cares about them? America won. Yeah! Wait. Oh no. What happened to the stock market? Whee! Yep, in 1929, the economy collapsed. Many were left jobless and starvation was also a big threat. This became known as the Great Depression, or how I like to call it, the Big Sad. But this was nothing. The worst thing of all was, the alcohol was banned. How can a man not have the right tools to abuse his wife and kids? This is outrageous! Anyways, bad jokes aside, things were pretty bad during the Depression. I wouldn't really recommend it to anyone. America, as always, minded its own business, and even refused to take part in a new global war between the Allies and Nazi Germany. Although FDR did supply the British with some weapons, albeit many of the naval vessels were destroyed by the U-boats. In December 7, 1941, however, in the day which has lived in infamy, Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, which led to Sleeping Giant waking up and declaring war on Japan. Germany also declared war on America, but that was a huge mistake. Between years 1943 and 1945, Germany was smashed between the Allies and the Soviets, while Japan was nuked twice in Hiroshima and Nagasaki because USA wanted the war to be over already. The Allies fully occupied the Japanese territory, while Germany and Europe itself was split between the Soviet Union and the West. Even though the most destructive war was over, the conflicts continued. For example, USA and the USSR wanted to expand their ideology across the globe, which led to a Cold War between them. USA created an alliance called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, while USSR created the Warsaw Pact. First proxy war was in Korea, which ended in a ceasefire between South and North Korea. Then, because of nuclear weapons in Turkey, USSR placed its nuclear weapons in Cuba, and JFK was not happy about that. At all. He planned a whole ass complex operation to take down the nuke, only to be completely dismissed because Khrushchev asked nicely to remove the nuclear weapons in Turkey. JFK avoided the nuclear war, but what he couldn't avoid was the sniper bullet shot by Lee Harvey Oswald to his head. But this wasn't the only terrible news for USA. In 1975, after 20 years of fighting, the war in Vietnam came to an end, with an American retreat and Viet Cong victory. Well, after this, America was doing mostly fine. But hey, at least the Soviets were not doing much better in Afghanistan. How could they lose to such a small nation? They will find an answer for that question 30 years later. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed and USA considered itself the victor of the Cold War. Many new post-Soviet countries joined NATO, which Russia did not really like. But who cares about Russia? The West was becoming more and more powerful, but
it also committed some brutal acts. For example, the invasion of Iraq by George Bush. It was unjustified and unprovoked war, and Bush really did deserve that shoe thrown across the room. But for those who are pro-Russian today, just because America invaded doesn't mean that others can invade too, you dinguses. But I digress. We have finally made it to 21st century. We know what made America so powerful and big, and how it dealt with problems which came along the way. Today, America is in a tough position. The President Joe Biden is supporting Ukraine against the Russian and at the same time trying to evade a nuclear war. The Republicans and Democrats are still acting up, and China seems to be pissed at America at the moment. To me, America is like that girlfriend who pisses you off sometimes, but you can't really hate her because you two spend so much time together. Yeah, America is America, and it has done some pretty nasty stuff in the past, like the attack on Native Americans, or the nuking of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and of course, the invasion of Iraq. But in my opinion, the country is still amazing. It has great nature, friendly people, and like many other places, it actually values our rights. If you are American watching this, I just want you to know how lucky you are to be born in a free country, because trust me, many places across the world don't have that privilege. Thanks for watching.